Hi everyone and welcome to the 18th episode of the World of Work podcast. In today's episode we spoke to Wakithi Mabaso, who is a UCT Medicine Graduate. He has just completed his Masters in Global Health Science and Epidemiology at the University of Oxford, and he is currently doing his Masters in Clinical and Therapeutic Neuroscience at the University of Oxford. And he's also a Rhodes Scholar. I hope that you enjoy today's episode and that you learn something from it. Hi Wakithi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Shubi?
I'm great, thanks. So Wakithi studied medicine at the University of Cape Town and he graduated with honors with cum laude. And now he's at the University of Oxford and he's doing his master's in global health science and epidemiology. How's that going so far?
It's honestly been an incredible ride. I've just actually wrapped up the master's and I've submitted my thesis about 2 weeks ago. It was quite intense. It's a 1 year master's, with a lot of content, but definitely a lot of learning and a lot of growth. So it's been a great experience.
That's amazing. And is there a reason why you chose to do your master's in global health science and epidemiology and not anything else?
Yeah, actually, this is a field that I've always wanted to dedicate and spend more time studying, um, getting to grips with. We've had some exposure previously in my medical training to research methodology during the medical degree. And once I gotten a taste of that, I basically fell in love with it and always told myself that I would come back to this at some point later on in my career after completing my studies and completing my necessary internship and community service. And it was just the right time to do so. So I eventually came back to it and was able to apply my all. It was fantastic.
That's amazing. I just want to go back to your time at UCT. So you
Sure.
graduated from Quizny and you got 8 distinctions, which means that you were able to study really good. You were able to study anything basically that you wanted to. What made you firstly decide to study medicine? And yeah.
So I had a few options at the time, and I was entertaining different courses of study. So I looked at business sciences at the University of Cape Town as well as medicine. I also looked at, interestingly enough, astrophysics, as I quite enjoyed the idea of being able to study such a incredible, perplexing field. And then I also considered politics, philosophy, and economics, both in South Africa and abroad. So I prepared for study abroad in the United States by taking the SAT. And one of my ideas was, hopefully to be able to apply to an institution there and do something sort of like a liberal arts degree, which I then take further. But a few decisions really helped me streamline my further course of action. Um, Funnily enough, even prior to that, when I was like still in high school, um, I really liked architecture, and that was something that I considered doing. However, I thought to get the opportunity to study medicine at Africa's best university in a context and environment that is relevant and important to me, to be able to gain a skill that impacts and helps my people, um, was, yeah, beyond any other path that I might have taken in terms of fulfillment, of course, also intellectual stimulation and rigor. I was really, really excited about the idea of getting to understand the human body and how it works, and to understand the minutiae behind physiological and other processes. So, a whole bunch of factors went into the decision, and I was fortunate enough to be accepted into medicine at the University of Cape Town. Yeah, after which, the rest is history.
And so medicine is seen to be like one of those really difficult degrees, really demanding. And you managed to not only finish the degree, but you also managed to pass with cum laude. Can you share any of like your study tips with the listeners?
Yeah, definitely. Having a study strategy, I think, is critical to achieving whatever goals you may have with regards to your degree. And achieving it requires a level of focus and dedication, which can be, managed by setting aside a structure for study. So you have a lot of demands on your time when you're at university, socially, individually, and academic and otherwise. And so creating a structure where you apportion time every day at least, or every weekend, where other people might be having fun or, hanging out with friends or, doing other social activities. If you can dedicate some of that time to your studies and invest some of that time to your studies, it accumulates in an exponential way, and over the long term really helps with the understanding of the material, with the understanding of techniques and methods to master your studies, and really prepares you well for things like assessments and exams. So the routine looks different for different people. Some people enjoy working in the evenings, some in the mornings, some prefer working on weekends. But I think a level of consistency and repetition is really important. So with regards to the material that you access in lectures, make sure that you understand it either by briefly going over the topic or the content before the lecture, during the lecture, and then revising it briefly afterwards, not necessarily in a detailed way, but just in a way that allows you to access the information. And then at a certain time point in the future, going over a bulk of material, let's say the week or the past 2 weeks of stuff that you've learned, and really picking apart your gaps and trying to make meaning of what you've learned as a reinforcement. So by the time you get to preparing for assessments and examinations, it's probably your third, even fourth time looking at the material, and it becomes much easier to consolidate. I definitely recommend that.
Yeah. And then, so you also during your time won you won an award for the like best oral presentation. How important would you say it is to have skills such as communication and other skills in the medical field? And what other skills would you say that are important other than oral?
Great that you bring that up. I'd say those skills are crucial. In fact, I did that work with a colleague and friend of mine, Dr. Stefan van der Walt. We studied together and we did this research and were able to present it at the Department of Psychiatry at their research day. And it's so important to be able to realize that any research outputs need to, at the end of the day, be communicated to the people that the research was done on, to the academic community, and to the general lay community at large. So starting early with building those communication skills is advisable. Obviously, you won't be perfect. It won't be amazing. You may be shy, you may be nervous. That's all good. The earlier you start, the easier it gets, the more used to it you get. And each time you do it again and again, it gets a little bit easier, so that by the time you're a little bit older, or there's a bit more weight or gravity behind some of the stuff that you have to communicate, you're more in sync with yourself and you're more comfortable at doing it. So yeah, my advice would be to jump in, because it's really crucial to be able to communicate research or any findings to any kind of audience. And really, it just takes practice and a bit of forethought into the language you use, and the way you connect with the audience.
And what other are there any more skills that you think are important other than communication?
Quite hard to beat communication, actually. I think it is the epitome of useful skills. But I would say, I mean, if we're speaking about skills, I always find space for soft skills, which sometimes people overlook. And I know that harnessing those soft skills in my life, at least personally, has been a huge factor in the quality of life I've been able to lead and things that I've been able to accomplish. So I think a healthy amount of emotional awareness, self-reflection over whatever current challenges you may be going through, things that may be difficult for you, things that may be easy for you, just taking some time to think about why and how, so that you can make yourself better for the next time, or equip yourself for the next challenge scenario, or even just learn how to enjoy yourself when things are going well, and allow yourself to enjoy yourself when things are going well, is really, really important, because it provides some perspective to life, that allows you to really flourish and put in the necessary amount of work and effort when you need to, but also take out the time when you need to do the things that you enjoy. So I'd say, yeah, reflection, emotional awareness, on top of communication are really important. Discipline and structure with regards to your routine. Um, It can get you really far, of course, and just bring people along with you, share what you know, share it with others, share it with people, empower people, especially if you have information that you think is important or has been important to you. Let someone else know about it, especially disadvantaged groups. You know that Black women especially experience the most bias in the workplace, in the academic space, in all spaces. And so think about Black women when you make decisions, when you have opportunities, plug them, because when you do, in fact, everyone wins. And yeah, these are some of the things that I try to incorporate in small and big ways in my journey.
And you were a Rhodes, well, you are a Rhodes Scholar, which is one of the most prestigious international scholarships. What would you say you did to set yourself apart in order to receive such a prestigious scholarship?
I have to start by saying that there's, of course, an element of luck in receiving any award. And so I do recognize that as well. There were many brilliant candidates, all who would have received the same award that I did, in terms of, ability and track record and CV. So I think it's a really important question when you ask then what do you do to set yourself apart. I don't necessarily look at it from that direction. It was like me having to try and differentiate myself from other people. Somewhere intrinsically, I believe I am my own unique individual, and it's more about really how do I communicate that story? How do I get someone else to actually see who I am? Because I already trust and believe that that is unique and different to someone else. We have a whole bunch of people who are really accomplished in whatever sense, in whatever they've been able to do. You find that you've all mostly done the same similar things. So what really does make you you is the fact that you're you, and the better you can be at conveying that to someone else, the more useful it can be for something like a selection process, but also, I mean, just in general life, in building connections, community, and networks.
Okay, so other than being yourself and conveying that well, what advice would you give to people who do want to receive the Rhodes Scholarship?
So there's a lot of resources out there that I'd certainly start by signposting first. It's crucial to have a good grasp of the requirements and stipulations, which are available on the Rhodes Trust website, outlining in quite detail what you need to consider to apply, the different steps of application, the timelines, as well as the different documents you need to prepare. So that's a great place to start. In fact, the best place to start. Give it time, definitely. Think about it for a while. Don't count yourself out. So believe immediately that you can do it and that you are worthy of applying for such a scholarship, and then get used to the idea of making the application so it becomes less of a frightening task for you. At least that was my approach. And another thing that I would definitely signpost people who have looked at this in greater detail than I have, there's a wonderful podcast, and perhaps it can be linked somewhere below for listeners to access. There's a podcast by Eusebius McKaiser, recently passed, unfortunately. However, he had released insightful, valuable information on how to apply for a scholarship and some of the necessary and critical things to think about when doing so. Himself as a selector on panels for many scholarships, I thought that was some of the most useful advice that really condensed at least many of my thoughts into one accessible space. But yeah, beyond giving yourself time to think about it, not counting yourself out, and speaking to people who've applied, speaking to people who've applied to other things, applied to many things too. But look at it as a journey, as a process, rather than as a checkbox thing that you do, because there's a lot behind it, and it's only the start of many much more. It's only the start of things to come. So to have that mindset of just being open to being challenged, right? Open to being challenged, open to being doubted, critiqued, um, and sort of standing up for yourself and your story. I think it's the crux of what to consider. But in terms of practical elements, the Rhodes Trust website is a great place to go and um, to check out UCT's podcast. Yeah.
Great. I just want to talk about your time at Oxford. So,
Yeah.
how would you compare your time at UCT to your time at Oxford?
I'd say they're completely different phases of my life. Um, Now I'm much older than I was coming straight out of high school when I was at UCT. And so you have different goals, different challenges to face. For me, I guess what's similar is that in both phases, I had to adjust. So adjusting to Cape Town and the University of Cape Town, having grown up in Durban, was a significant challenge. Similarly, adjusting to Oxford in England, having lived in South Africa, was an equal significant challenge, if not for different reasons. Um, so some of the things you really have to consider and contemplate, um, which are parallels in the two, are things like imposter syndrome. Do you deserve to be here? Um, are you worthy of the space, of learning in the space amongst esteemed students that surround you? And that's a significant thing that affects a lot of people. It certainly affected me. You can imagine in medical school, you're surrounded by a bunch of really bright students. Similarly at Oxford, and if you allow doubts to creep in, it can wreak havoc. So just to be prepared and aware that that doubt it's not real, it's also unfounded, and to slowly work through that, it's an important thing. Um, yeah, but also things like different climates, um, and differences in daylight and daylight hours. Think about the latitude of where South Africa is. It's much closer to the equator than somewhere like England. And so you have different daylight patterns, and having grown up in a place where your body is used to a certain sort of rhythm can really, really affect you if you don't consider it in advance, even if you do. So again, just to be aware of that. Um, but it's been amazing. I guess another positive similarity is the fact that when I came to University of Cape Town and I was in medical school with a whole bunch of keen students and friends, it was like, wow, we're all here. We all love to learn. We all love what we're doing. Or we may or may not know that we do, but we're all motivated. And to be around like-minded people who enjoy studying and learning and knowledge was just freeing, honestly. Something that couldn't necessarily be said of the high school experience. We have a whole sort of bell curve of different kinds of individuals and personalities. So to be connected by, a certain academic drive was incredible. It was a great environment to be in Cape Town in that sense. And similarly here at Oxford, just to know that everyone is on the same boat. The library is the coolest place to be, and the libraries are beautiful, and people love to be there, and it's just a vibe. So just to really like settle into that and to just know that like we're here to learn. We're here to learn new things. We had to learn in many different ways. And to have that reinforced and affirmed, I think that is a really big positive similarity between the two. But yeah, also just the history um, behind the place, good and bad. I think it's important to engage it. And these are important questions when we think of the University of Cape Town, especially, as well as the University of Oxford, and the hand that the institutions have had to play in many different processes and historical events, and epistemologies. So, yeah, there's a lot to chew on there. Um, and you can honestly go in any direction. But what's so great about both spaces is that once you arrive, you have the freedom to make your path, to forge your path, and you know, the river never runs dry. Yeah.
Wow. You have a publication that focuses on depression and anxiety among medical students in South Africa. Um, And what were your findings? And how can students who are struggling in terms of taking their mental health during taking care of their mental health during their studies?
So this is the same work we did with my friend and colleague, and what we essentially wanted to do was to advocate for student mental health services and awareness. And we felt that the best way to do so was to produce research. We believe the university listened to research, they valued and prioritized research. And so a message that was packaged in that way would go much further than, um, you know, just saying, hey, listen to us, or hey, pay attention to us. And essentially what we wanted to do was just paint a picture of the problem, the burden of the issue. And our findings echoed a lot of similar findings in places worldwide, which is that about a quarter to a fifth of medical students experience symptoms that put them at risk of anxiety and depression. And so that's significant enough a number for faculties and departments to take heed and take notice. What's been great to see in recent years is that that has been done in small and big ways. So simple things like breaking down the stigma, speaking about mental health, speaking about mental illness, the fact that it affects us, many of us, most of us, being able to acknowledge when you are affected and seek help without sort of being judged or fearing negative repercussions, the normalizing of mental illness. And in place of that, the enforcing of strategies to deal. So enforcing and recommending like healthy lifestyles, things like regular diet, regular exercise, regular patterns of sleep, basic things that drive home habits that really safeguard and buttress us against risks, psychological distress that can affect us. This applies obviously and applied to medical students, but all students at large in general. And things like creating more access to services like therapists, especially if you think about some of the challenges with that at university is you have lectures the whole day, you have assignments to write, or you have to be at the clinic, for example, or you have to be, clerking, working, doing internships, and it's like, where's the time? People aren't working at night. So allowing faculties to see that maybe more flexibility or fluidity in schedules needs to be allowed, or providing mental health providers who can work at flexible hours in the evenings and be a port of call for students, or some of the means that were implemented at least as a response by the Faculty of Health Sciences at the time. And hopefully those have grown and become more complex and abundant today.
Earlier on, you mentioned, imposter syndrome, and you mentioned the importance of speaking for Black women and bringing them in and now, you have a study on mental health. Where would you say that this comes from, like this desire to want to help people who are either, previously disadvantaged or people who are battling with mental health?
I don't know. I think it's just good to be, I don't know, good to people. I think you just want to help people who are struggling in sustainable ways, of course, in ways that make sense. I guess there's an element of that maybe in my character that seeks to connect with people and allow them to realize the best versions of themselves, and also to be able to observe and analyze systems of injustice, and try address them in whatever way that I can. So I guess a lot of this work and things that I've done have answered those kinds of motivations. They must be intrinsic because I seem to have a similar theme or thread of interests or work. But I think there's something about just like, observing society, picking out some of the injustices that are at play, and addressing them, because injustice, I mean, it's there in the word. It's not just. So why should it continue? It shouldn't. Unfortunately, the way power works and dynamics work is such that injustices remain and things remain skewed. So if you can do some small thing in some small field, even if the field changes over time, to allow people to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel recognized, to be empowered themselves, to then also do the same for others. Yeah, to me, that's just what's most meaningful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So you mentioned that you have just finished your master's. Do you know what you want to do from now, like once you finish, once you graduate?
Yes, so the Rhodes Scholarship provides funding for at least 2 years, up to 3 years for a PhD. So you can essentially utilize the funding from the scholarship to complete either a 2 year long master's degree or to complete two 1 year long master's degrees, or to go straight into a PhD. And the way I've decided to do it is to complete two 1 year long master's degrees. Having completed my current one, I will then start my second one in October, and I'll be doing a master's in Clinical and Therapeutic Neurosciences at the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Oxford. And really excited to just, yeah, dive into that. I feel like I started wide and I'm going narrower in terms of having started with like research methods, epidemiology, stats, and now narrowing down on a focus that at least I've clinically identified as something that interests me, which is mental health and psychiatry. And so, yeah, who knows what the future holds thereafter. Potentially interested in specializing, um, potentially interested in working in industry and getting a sense of that dynamic too. Having had already clinical experience and academic experience. Um, so yeah, I think another important thing is to also have a plan, but also know that that plan is a framework, but that you can also take opportunities as they come, and to have grace with yourself with regards to things that may unfold in ways that aren't necessarily according to your plan, um, because that's life.
And finally, you have a really great track record. I mean, 8 distinctions when you graduated. You did your at UCT, you graduated your honors with cum laude. You're about to have a double master's from Oxford. Have you ever experienced failure or like disappointment? And if you have, how did you deal with it?
Certainly. In fact, I welcome failure. I could only achieve these things by having failed in other things. I continue to fail in my life. It's normal. I think we all experience failure, but unfortunately, maybe sometimes have a complicated relationship with it. What I found is useful for me, my approach to it is that it teaches me something. It teaches me about a gap that I have. It teaches me about something that needs to be adjusted, going forward, modified. If it doesn't work, change it. It's not a reflection on yourself. You're not a failure. It's just what you've done has not worked out. So try again in a different way. That's kind of been my approach to it. Um, and it allows me to enter new challenges and obstacles with curiosity, whilst also not being too hard on myself, and to welcome the possibility of failure, because it's also very normal and it actually shapes us. So I certainly have experienced my fair share. Um, Certain assignments and things in medical school, um, certain assignments, things in Oxford, you can fail in so many ways. It could be academic, it could be with relationships. Um, but if you just carry the string through all, that in fact, this is an opportunity for you to figure out a different way to approach what you were trying to do, then I think you always win.
Mm. Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to talk to us and to talk to me on behalf of the society. I really appreciate it, and I have no doubt that the people listening to this are going to learn something. And I'm just wishing you all the best for your second master's and all
Thank you,
the best
Shubi.
for your medical career going forward.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you this afternoon, and also to speak with your listeners. And I do hope that some of these words can create some sort of ripple effect, um, and that can propagate. Um, and yeah, I think it's good.
Thank you. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you learned something from it. Bye.